Something just happened inside the Cleveland Browns locker room, and almost nobody saw it coming. This wasn't a highlight. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't even from the Browns media team. It was raw, unfiltered. And the second it hit social media, fans stopped scrolling and started asking questions. Because in the middle of a season filled with frustration, silence, and behind-the-scenes drama, a rookie quarterback, Shadure Sanders, just received something that shocked the entire league: a custom-made award built by the players themselves. No front office ceremony, no PR spin, just real teammates showing real loyalty. Now on the surface, it looked like a joke, a simple nickname, a funny title, a light moment in an intense season. But if you look closer, you realize this wasn't just a viral locker room clip. This was a message, not to the fans, not to the media, but to the people running the Cleveland Browns organization. Because the same players who once stayed quiet are now sending their loudest signal yet. This is our quarterback, whether you're ready or not. But here's the twist: this moment didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, what led up to this award, the tension, the silence, and the truth behind Shadure's rise, tells a very different story than what reporters have been saying. And once you hear what was really happening behind closed doors, from the secret training sessions, to the leaks no one covered, to the reason some players were ready to leave the team altogether, you'll understand why this supposed joke of an award just changed everything. Stay tuned, because what you're about to hear is the story nobody in Cleveland wanted going public. Not long ago, the Cleveland Browns locker room felt like it was tearing at the seams. You could feel it even if no one said it out loud. The tension whispered through anonymous sources, leaked DMs, and half-cryptic social media posts from players who clearly weren't happy. There were rumors of frustration, confusion, and, according to insiders, big names quietly exploring a way out of Cleveland altogether. But the strangest part, you wouldn't know any of this if you followed the headlines. The mainstream media? Silent. Local reporters, dodging the details like it was bad for business. Behind closed doors, it was different. There were whispers that the locker room didn't trust the front office, didn't understand why certain decisions were being made, and weren't buying into how Shedeur Sanders was being treated. Now think about that: a rookie quarterback, new to the NFL, walking into a team already known for instability, was suddenly at the center of a locker room implosion. And not because he said the wrong thing, not because he showed up with a chip on his shoulder, but because, according to some players, he was never given a fair shot. It wasn't about personality. It wasn't about drama. It was about what the team wasn't willing to do and what certain veterans started questioning from day one. And all while this storm quietly brewed behind the scenes, Shedeur said nothing. He kept working. He kept studying. He kept preparing like someone who expected to play, even when no one told him he would. That silence, it wasn't weakness. It was focus. But even then, the environment around him wasn't pretty. Some linemen were hinting at their frustration online, not blatantly, but just enough to show they weren't satisfied with how management was handling things. Anonymous leaks began describing a divided room, built on uncertainty, miscommunication, and a growing sense that leadership was out of touch with reality. And the media? Still, nothing. Some fans believed the local media was staying quiet for a reason, because exposing internal chaos would have made the coaching staff look unstable, at a time when the franchise couldn't afford another scandal. So what did they do instead? They shifted the spotlight. They pushed polished narratives. And while that was happening, the actual story, the one unfolding inside that locker room, was reaching a boiling point. Players weren't just frustrated with how Shedeur was being used. They were starting to question why the organization seemed so hesitant to let him lead. Which is why, when the locker room gathered around him weeks later and handed him the HIMMY Award, it didn't feel random. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt like something very different. It felt like a correction, a statement, a message that made one thing absolutely clear: the players had seen enough, and they were done waiting for approval. They didn't need a press release. They didn't need media backing. They sure didn't need anyone in the front office telling them how to feel. They made up their minds the one way players always do, through what they see every day, on the field, in the locker room, and when no one's watching. The HIMMY Award, that bright, custom-made symbol, wasn't just a moment of fun. It was an announcement. It was the players themselves telling the world, this is the guy we believe in. This is the guy we're backing. And if you're not paying attention, that's on you. Here's the key detail most people missed. Players don't go out of their way to create symbolic awards for someone they don't respect. They don't joke about a nickname unless they've already bought into what it represents. And rookies, they don't get that kind of respect, not like this, not this fast. This team, the same one that felt divided only weeks before, suddenly looked united. Not by emails, not by leadership speeches, but by one moment. The viral celebration might have only lasted a few seconds on social media, but to everyone inside that building, it was years' worth of locker room politics exploding all at once. And here's the part that pushes this story from interesting to game-changing. That energy, it didn't come from the coaching staff. It didn't come from some viral marketing push. It came from within the players, organically, honestly, and with purpose. Because while the front office stuck to their cautious script, and the media curated the headlines they wanted fans to see, the players were writing their own story. And this was chapter 1. They didn't need to wait for a franchise decision. They had already made one, and it was wearing number 2. It could have been brushed off in 10 seconds. A group of Browns players circled around a rookie in the middle of the locker room, laughing, hyping him up, holding out a t-shirt and a trophy that read the word HIMMY. On the surface, it looked like just another locker room moment. A quick video, a catchy name, good vibes after a win. But the moment it hit social media, everything stopped. Not because it was flashy, but because it felt real. It wasn't polished. It wasn't staged. There were no media people setting up lights. No reporter with a microphone and no PR handler telling players what to say, just raw emotion, pure energy. Grown men crowding around Shadure Sanders, cheering, laughing, some even yelling his name like he just won a championship. And if you've been around football long enough, you know this wasn't some throwaway clip. This was a line in the sand. Because in the NFL, things like this don't happen by accident. Locker rooms don't hand out custom-made awards to people they're not rocking with, especially rookies. Let that sink in. A rookie, in a room filled with veterans who have seen it all, egos, hype, overhyped college stars, somehow earned enough respect for his teammates to go out, design an award, and crown him with it in front of the entire team. That doesn't happen over one game or one play. That happens because of what they've been seeing day after day, week after week, when no one else was watching. And if you look closely at that clip, you'll notice something that most fans missed. These players weren't laughing at Shedeur, they were laughing with him. This wasn't a joke, it was a celebration. A message dressed up like comedy. A viral moment hiding something far deeper behind the scenes. They didn't give him the HIMMY Award because he was loud, or because he demanded the spotlight, or because the front office told them to get behind their new toy. They gave it to him because he earned the room. And in the NFL, that's everything. Because you can fake media coverage. You can polish narratives. You can spin storylines through carefully chosen headlines and sources inside the building. But you cannot fake locker room respect. Not even a little. And this was 53 players saying, "We've made our decision and we don't need permission." They weren't just handing out a t-shirt. They were redefining who their leader is. And if you pay attention to the reactions, some things become impossible to ignore. Veterans weren't just smiling, they were embracing him. Star players, respected voices in the locker room, were totally locked in, not just participating, but leading the charge. And Shedeur, he looked shocked, not because he questioned his own work ethic, but because he didn't expect the moment to come this soon. Because here's the truth, they didn't crown him after a media campaign. They didn't celebrate him off of hype. They celebrated him off of consistency. Every late-night film study. Every throw that didn't make ESPN but left veterans nodding in silence. The way he handled himself when he got no reps, no headlines, and no guarantees, that's what this moment was about. And the power behind it isn't just emotional, it's symbolic. Think about how most first-year quarterbacks are treated. They're hazed, tested, hit with doubt. They fight through every practice just to prove they belong. But this was different. Shedeur didn't walk into the season looking to be crowned. He walked in just working quietly, relentlessly, without excuse. And that's what caught the locker room's attention. Players started noticing things, the way he stayed calm when coaches ignored him, the way he kept preparing when everyone thought he was holding a clipboard for the year, the way he never acted entitled, even when he had every reason to. That behavior spreads. It speaks louder than stats. And eventually, teammates start talking. So when that award hit his hands, it meant more than fans realized. It wasn't a joke, it was a declaration. It said, "This guy isn't just part of the team, he's who we're following now." In a league where locker rooms can fracture in a blink, where egos take over and rosters implode under pressure, unity is rare. And this was unity in a moment, not forced, not manufactured, but earned. And here's the twist, nobody from management was involved. no social team, no coach. This didn't come from the top down, it came from the bottom up. The most powerful endorsements in sports always do. The HIMMY Award isn't going to show up in Shadure's stat line. It won't be listed in his contract. But it might be the most important thing to happen to the Browns all season. Because if you really understand NFL culture, you know exactly what just happened. The players didn't wait for leadership to figure it out. They made the decision for them. And the front office has two options: follow where the locker room is going, or get left behind. Weeks before the HIMMY Award ever made it to the internet, before a single camera caught his teammates cheering his name, Shadure Sanders was already turning heads inside the Browns building. Just not in the way fans are used to seeing. There weren't any viral throws, no official endorsements, no quarterback controversies on national talk shows. Just one guy showing up every day doing what most rookies never do. He treated every week like his number was already being called, even when it was. And that changed everything. Because when a rookie doesn't get reps, most either complain or coast. They go through the motions, check boxes, and wait their turn. But Shadure, he prepared like he was the starter even while standing on the sideline. Film study, mental reps, mechanics, and most importantly, he never acted bitter. That's what caught his teammates' attention, way before the public caught on. And while the outside world was feeding on rumors, reports of tension, confusion, and whispered questions about whether Cleveland even believed in him, inside that locker room, something else was happening. Respect was building. Quietly, organically. Not from hype, but from habits. You could see it in the small, untelevised moments. A defensive captain holding back a grin on the sidelines after a perfect spiral. Linemen nodding their heads after a rep that wouldn't make the highlight reel, but made sense to someone who knows the game. Myles Garrett, not usually one to give away emotion, sitting down after a Shadure deep ball and just shaking his head like he'd seen something special. No mic, no interviews, just a guy throwing a ball and commanding attention. And here's the thing, in the NFL, trust isn't built through words. You earn it when people are watching, but you earn even more when they're not. The veterans saw it. They saw how Shadure stayed late after practice without anyone asking. They noticed he didn't cut reps short, didn't make excuses when his chances felt unfair, didn't bring ego into the locker room even when outsiders assumed the hype had gone to his head. And slowly, word started spreading, not through press releases, but whispers. Yo, this kid really puts in work. He's further ahead than people think. He's got that demeanor. And that's when you know something's shifting, when the players start passing the message around more than the staff. Because fans, they were focused on the depth chart. The media, repeating familiar storylines. But inside the building, Shadure wasn't a question mark anymore. He wasn't some project. He was preparing like someone who already knew the moment would come, and when it did, he'd be ready. And here's the wildest part, this climb, it happened while rumors swirled around him. Leaks suggested coaching staff weren't aligned. Reporters hinted that he was being protected or hidden. Some analysts even criticized the Browns' inability to figure out their QB situation, as if Shadure was just Plan C, floating in the background. But the locker room saw something totally different. A guy walking into chaos and choosing to lead without even having the job. Think about how rare that is. Most young QBs walk into the league with a spotlight and crumble under the pressure. They chase attention, push brand deals, post social clips from training sessions like they're already stars, but not this one. Shadure did something most quarterbacks can't fake. He ignored the noise, and the people who matter most, the ones in that building with him every day, took notice. That's why when the HIMMY Award happened, it had nothing to do with social media brownie points. It was the result of weeks of silent trust building. Because every throw that didn't make ESPN, every moment he kept his head down when he could have snapped back at critics, every single time he studied film like he was starting even when he was, those things left a mark. And by the time he actually stepped on the field for real NFL action, Shadure played like someone who'd been there before. Reads, clean, decisions, sharp, body language, unshaken. No panic, no rookie meltdown, just a calm, surgical performance like he'd been quietly preparing for this since high school. Because he had. That poise, that calmness under pressure, that leadership without needing a title, that's not something you manufacture at the professional level. That's the result of years of discipline. And by the time the award hit his hands, his teammates already knew what fans were just starting to figure out. This wasn't some rookie moment. This was a new standard being set right in front of their eyes. The guy they were once told wasn't ready, had just controlled the game like a vet. And he didn't need a hype machine to do it. All he needed was a clean pocket, a little silence, and enough time to show them who he really was. From the outside, the story was all wrapped up nicely. Shadure Sanders, he was developing, sure, but slowly. He was being coached up, brought along carefully by the Browns staff and groomed for the future. At least that's what the fans were told. Local reports painted a clean picture. Kevin Stefanski and his coaches were in full control, guiding the rookie quarterback through a master plan. There were glowing articles about film sessions, strategic rep management, leadership programs. The message: everything you're seeing on the field is coming from inside these walls. From the team, from the coaches, from the process. It sounded good, too good. In fact, it sounded rehearsed. Because while those stories were being pushed out like clockwork, most fans didn't realize what wasn't being said. Where were the reports about locker room tension from earlier in the season? Where was the coverage of frustrated players hinting online that something wasn't right? Where were those quiet stories about Shadure being iced out of early reps despite showing starter-level control in practice? They weren't there, and that wasn't an accident. Every media outlet close to the Browns was focusing on one thing: controlling the narrative. And if you've been around the NFL long enough, you know exactly what that means. When stories all start pointing in the same direction, something's usually being covered up in the other. Because the official version of Shadure's rise, it didn't match reality, and fans started noticing. For one, Kevin Stefanski's history with quarterbacks has never exactly been elite. Solid, maybe. But not groundbreaking enough to suddenly turn a rookie into a calm, laser-accurate field general overnight. So when reporters began crediting him directly for Shadure's emergence, fans raised an eyebrow. Then too, because it didn't make sense. This wasn't a young player learning on the fly. This was someone who looked prepared, not just sharp, but polished in ways that usually take years. And when people finally dug deeper, they found the cracks. Whispers surfaced that some of those glowing reports were being, let's say, guided. Sources close to the team suggested coaches were leaking favorable quotes, keeping reporters focused on the team's involvement, not Shadure's background. Some fans even speculated certain media members were protecting their access by going along with it. None of it could be proven, but the pattern was way too obvious to ignore. And while the media doubled down on Stefanski as the mastermind, something way more authentic was unfolding quietly in the shadows. The real work was happening far away from the facility. No cameras, no awards, no interviews, just one veteran QB coach, named Daryl Colbert. Colbert wasn't an NFL staffer, not a Browns employee, and definitely not the PR face of Shadure's story. He was a personal trainer, a private football mind who'd worked with Shadure since high school. And when he finally spoke publicly, it shattered everything the media had been selling for weeks. He revealed that while the Browns were limiting Shadure's practice reps behind the starter, Shadure was still running full weekly QB sessions. On his own, away from the facility, every Monday, every Tuesday, without fail. They weren't doing throw-around drills or casual warm-ups. These were full-on mental and physical tune-ups. Film review on every snap, footwork breakdown, timing corrections, arm conditioning decision, making work sessions tailored around NFL defenses, all happening while the coaching staff was pushing a message that made it sound like they were developing the kid from scratch. In reality, Shadure wasn't being mentored as much as he was being overlooked and fixing it himself. That subtle distinction, it changed everything. Because when Colbert showed just how long and consistently Shadure had been running that routine, dating back to long before the draft, fans understood. This wasn't a player being built inside the Browns facility. This was a professional prior to ever being allowed to play like one. And suddenly, all of that misalignment made sense. Why he looked calm under pressure. Why he made quick reads that you can't just teach in camp. Why the locker room got behind him before the media ever did. Because the players must have seen this. Some of them probably knew. They'd hear whispers, see how sharp his reads were, watch him fire routes in practice and think, wait, why isn't this guy starting? And that's why the media narrative felt off. By pushing the idea that Shadure was developing solely under Stefanski's system, they were also pushing the coaching staff's control over the success story. But when Colbert told the truth, the illusion cracked. Turns out, while the front office was playing PR chess, Shadure's inner circle had already built him into a different kind of quarterback altogether. One who didn't need the spotlight, who didn't ask for permission, who already knew how to lead because he'd been preparing for this exact opportunity without waiting for anybody's approval. At first, Everything about the Shadure Sanders story looked like your typical NFL rookie arc. A young quarterback trying to find his place in a veteran locker room, learning behind the starter, getting a few reps when the game was out of reach. From the outside, it all looked scripted, expected. But there was something off. Something the more observant fans and analysts started to feel early. For weeks, the official story coming out of Cleveland was smooth, too smooth. Local reporters praised the structure. They highlighted how Kevin Stefanski was supposedly guiding Shadure's development with intention and patience. They pointed to long film sessions, detailed quarterback meetings, steady growth under pressure. But the tone of these stories sounded manufactured, too polished, almost rehearsed. That's when red flags started going up. Because here's the thing, if you know Kevin Stefanski's history with quarterbacks, you know it doesn't exactly read like a fairy tale. This isn't a coach known for grooming breakthrough stars from scratch. The laundry list of signal callers who never quite clicked under his system is well documented. So when the coaching staff suddenly became the centerpiece of every story surrounding Shadure's so-called transformation, fans started asking a very simple question: where was all this development really happening? Because from the eye test, fans could tell Shadure wasn't playing like someone just now being taught how to throw at the NFL level. His footwork, clean. His mechanics, consistent. His decision-making under pressure, better than most veterans. That kind of control doesn't appear within a few weeks of coaching, especially when you're barely getting reps. It's the kind of polish that comes from years, not days, of deliberate preparation. So naturally, people started digging deeper. Old training clips, interviews, comments from teammates. Anything to get insight into where this version of Shadure actually came from. And guess what? It wasn't from the Browns' facility. That's when the cracks in the narrative started to show. Some online threads began hinting that the media stories weren't just off. They might have been strategically planted. Not in a conspiracy theory kind of way, but in a protect the institution kind of way. According to speculation floating quietly around NFL circles, coaches inside the Browns organization may have been trying to reshape the public perception. Not necessarily to smear Shadure, but to make sure they didn't get left out of the credit conversation if things started to take off. In other words, the franchise may not have built the rookie, but they wanted to claim him. Now, let's be clear. None of this can be 100% confirmed. That's how these things work. Public leaks are rarely traced back to one microphone, but the pattern started to emerge. Reporters seemed happy to highlight Stefanski's approach. Articles zoomed in on practice routines and assistant coaches watching tape. Meanwhile, not a single outlet was mentioning what insiders already suspected, that Shadure Sanders was being kept on the sidelines longer than necessary, and that certain people in the building were pushing back against his fast rise. And what about those earlier leaks? The whispers at the beginning of the season about locker room tension, frustration from veterans, and confusion internally about how quarterback duties were being handled. Suddenly, those stories vanished. No explanations, no follow-ups, just silence. You'd think someone would have gone back and updated the story, right? Given the turnaround, given the viral HIMMY Award moment, given the shift in mood inside the team. But that never happened. Instead, we got more soft-focused profiles on the coaching staff, more emphasis on how Cleveland's strategy was starting to pay off. And that silence said more than headlines ever could. Because here's where it gets real. In the NFL, when the media goes quiet on tension, it usually means two things. Either the situation calmed down quietly, or someone asked them to look the other way. And with everything riding on a stable image, from ticket sales to endorsements to management security, guess which one's more likely? But while the official narrative was keeping things squeaky clean, inside the locker room, players had already made up their minds. They knew when Shadure trained. They knew how many hours he put in. They saw him before and after practice. They weren't buying into curated media narratives because they had front-row seats to the real story. And eventually, the public did too. The moment video of the HIMMY Award leaked online, it blew open all the spin. This wasn't a player being celebrated because the coaching staff told the press he was developing. This was a player being authentically crowned by his teammates, people who'd been skeptical, people who had every reason not to trust the process. They were the ones giving him the crown, not because he played politics, not because he said the right things in interviews, but because he earned it the hardest way possible, when no one believed he would. And once that truth came out, all the carefully crafted stories began to feel like exactly what they were: PR. Neatly packaged narratives meant to protect reputations, not reflect reality. And just like that, the trust between the public and the official Cleveland storyline cracked, because fans knew the real story wasn't happening in the press conferences. It was happening somewhere else entirely, in private training sessions, in quiet showings of leadership, and in a rookie who didn't need a system to shape him, because he had already shaped himself. While the media painted a convenient picture of Shadure Sanders improving under the watchful eye of Cleveland's coaching staff, the real story was happening far away from the cameras, on fields with no reporters, in sessions with no media pass, and with a mentor who wasn't part of any NFL franchise. His name, Daryl Colbert. And the moment he broke his silence, the myth around how Shadure was becoming NFL-ready inside the Browns facility fell apart. Here's what most fans didn't know. While Cleveland's coaches were keeping Shadure benched, and while the press claimed he was slowly learning the system, he wasn't waiting around. He was training, twice a week, every Monday and Tuesday, with someone who had been there from the beginning, not beginning as in rookie training camp. Beginning as in high school. Daryl Colbert quietly worked with Shadure for years, long before NFL scouts started paying attention. And during those early weeks in the season when Sanders wasn't even getting real practice reps, those off-day sessions became everything. No cameras, no media, no PR, and those workouts weren't light walkthroughs or casual drills. They were high-intensity, high-discipline routines that mirrored the NFL's best preparation methods: footwork resets, pocket mechanics, throw timing, release speed, motion analysis. If Shadure's foot dragged an inch, they fixed it. If his shoulder dipped awkwardly on certain throws, it was corrected the next morning. Every minuscule detail that most rookies ignore or never even notice was dissected and improved before his next appearance in practice even happened. So while the press acted like Sanders was just catching on, the truth is he already had. He just didn't get the reps to show it. Because behind closed doors, he was already operating like a starter. Not in title, but in routine, in mindset, in work ethic. And this is where things really started to shift. When Daryl finally went public, breaking down what those training sessions looked like, the timeline didn't match what the Browns had been telling the public. There was no magical turning point in the facility. No sudden breakthrough moment led by the coaching staff. Everything people were now seeing from Shadure on Sundays had started long before Cleveland drafted him. That leadership, that calm in the pocket, that precision, it wasn't built in some team film room. It was carved out through years of repetition off the grid and continued long after the world stopped watching. And what stood out wasn't just the workouts, it was how few people even knew they were happening. Because while other rookies might use time on the bench to wait, complain, or mentally check out, Shadure treated it like the biggest chance of his life to get better without anyone watching. No coach was forcing him, no assistant was setting up appointments. This was self-driven, self-funded, self-motivated, and in the eyes of the players around him, that's what earned their respect. They weren't impressed because he looked polished. They were impressed because they saw why. They noticed him putting in extra weight room sessions when the building was nearly empty. They saw him reviewing film on plays he didn't even get to run. They noticed his presence, not just in games, but in how he carried himself, like someone who already knew he belonged. And slowly, that caught people's attention. Quietly at first, a few nods from teammates, veterans making eye contact after a crisp throw, offensive linemen patting him on the helmet without a highlight to justify it. This wasn't hype, it was real recognition, the kind that builds over time, not headlines. Because here's the truth NFL insiders will tell you that fans don't always hear. Talent is common. Dedication when nobody's watching isn't. Plenty of quarterbacks sound great in interviews. Plenty show up and do what they're told. And a lot of them fall apart the moment adversity hits. But Shadure was different. He didn't ask why he wasn't starting. He didn't passively wait for a turn. He trained for the moment like it was already coming, and every single week he hit reset, mechanics, timing, adjustments, all on his own time, all with no end game guaranteed. And that's what made the HIMMY Award so much bigger than it looked. Because by the time teammates wrapped him in cheers, chanted his name, and handed him a trophy they designed themselves, the buy-in had already happened. That award wasn't the beginning, it was proof of everything the locker room had quietly watched unfold. And for the coaches and press who had painted this as an in-house transformation, it was an uncomfortable truth. The growth had nothing to do with them. Sure, Cleveland's staff deserves credit for drafting him, but making Shadure NFL ready wasn't their doing. That work started long ago, in places they never saw, in sessions they didn't arrange, and with discipline they couldn't teach. And when all of that came to light, the media spin started to sound hollow. Because you can fabricate quotes. You can polish articles. You can build narratives around whoever you want. But what you can't fake is the respect of an NFL locker room. And that's exactly what Shadure earned, one hidden session at a time. Veteran NFL players don't hand out compliments easily. Not in a league where talent is assumed, where rookies come and go every year, and where trust is earned through action, not talk. So when the Cleveland Browns locker room slowly began rallying behind Shadure Sanders, it wasn't because someone gave them a script to follow. It was because they'd seen the difference, up close, without the filters, without the press. And that's what changed everything. It didn't happen overnight. At first, Shadure was just another new face on the roster. A rookie quarterback with a famous last name, sure, but still a backup. Quiet, composed, observing, not trying to outshine anyone. Not trying to play politics, just showing up, doing the work, and saying almost nothing. But NFL players notice more than fans ever see. They notice body language and practice. They notice who stays late, even when there's nothing left on the schedule. They notice how a guy reacts to getting 2 reps in a day instead of 20. And what they started noticing with Shadure was discipline at a level they weren't used to seeing from someone his age. This wasn't a rookie staying quiet and waiting his turn. This was a rookie preparing like the moment could come any second, even when it looked like it never would. And that mindset, that nonstop professionalism, it's contagious. Veterans started to lean in. At first, it was subtle. A nudge of encouragement after a well-placed throw. A keep doing you comment walking off the field. But the whispers grew louder as the season kept rolling. And somewhere in the middle of it all, something started to happen behind the scenes that no coach or media outlet could manufacture. The locker room began to trust him. Not because of the stats, not because of interviews, and not because the coaches said so, but because these players were watching someone operate like he'd already earned the job before anyone even called his name. It's one thing to throw a perfect spiral, quarterbacks at this level all do. It's another to go without complaining when your reps are cut short, or when the media ignores your existence, or when teammates are divided about what should happen at your position. That's what stood out most. Shadure never flinched, never felt sorry for himself, never made excuses. In a league full of egos, his silence was loud. And then came his moment. It doesn't really matter which game it was. The numbers, the completions, the yardage, they're impressive, but they won't define what happened. What mattered was what didn't happen. Shadure didn't panic. He didn't look overwhelmed. He didn't crumble under pressure like most rookies do when the lights finally hit them. He walked onto the field like he'd been there before. And in many ways, he had. Because while the outside world had just started figuring out his name, the people in that building already knew. His poise, built over hundreds of unrecorded sessions. His accuracy, polished under the guidance of people far from the franchise. His composure, sharpened with every ignored rep, every overlooked decision, every quiet day where he still showed up like it was Sunday. And after that first breakout performance, things shifted fast. Players who used to stay neutral made their stances obvious. They dapped him up on the sidelines. They protected him in the media with praise. They stuck with him after tough plays, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. They saw the work and now they were seeing the results. And what comes with belief like that? Loyalty. That's what people don't understand about NFL locker rooms. Flashy plays might get you headlines, but it's the daily work, the invisible grind, that earns you the kind of respect that actually shapes a team's direction. And by now, it was clear, the Browns weren't just playing alongside Shadure Sanders. They were rolling with him. That's why the HIMMY Award didn't feel random, not even close. That moment wasn't a team hyping up a rookie because the cameras were rolling or because they needed something feel-good to post. That was a declaration. It was the players saying, "This guy, he's the one." They're not handing out funny shirts and custom trophies because someone had a good week. They're doing it because this was the guy who earned it during the weeks that nobody even cared to watch. He held himself to a standard that inspired the guys around him. And the NFL is a hard place to impress people. It's full of sharks. But when a rookie walks in and becomes the calmest guy in the room, the one who doesn't blink when everything is caving in, veterans notice that quick. They've seen hype guys before. Players who talk the talk, but melt the second reality hits. And they've seen what happens when a locker room follows the wrong guy. So this time, they weren't interested in media spin. They weren't waiting for the coaches to set the tone. The players led with their actions, and the HIMMY Award was their way of making sure everyone else finally caught up. It wasn't about jokes or memes or social media attention. It was about giving visible form to the invisible work. A rookie earned the room, and in the NFL, that changes everything. At first glance, the HIMMY Award looked funny, lighthearted, just a group of NFL veterans poking fun at their rookie quarterback, celebrating him for a few flashy plays. Right. But anyone who spent more than 5 minutes inside a real NFL locker room knew better. That award wasn't for laughs. It was a signal, not for social media, not for fans, for management. Because in professional football, gestures like that don't come easy. They're not spontaneous. They're not random. And they're definitely not handed out unless something's changed behind closed doors. So when the Cleveland Browns players hoisted their rookie quarterback in front of the cameras with a custom-made award they created themselves, they didn't just hype him up, they validated him. And in the process, they quietly delivered a message to the people in charge of this franchise. We've made our decision. Now it's your move. Think about what this really means. A few months earlier, this same locker room was swimming in tension. Reports, leaks, rumors about dissatisfaction, confusion, maybe even chaos. Some players, big names, not fringe roster guys, were allegedly considering their future with the team if things didn't change. No one said it out loud, but the threat was there. And what was the issue? According to the whispers, how the franchise was handling Shadure Sanders. That's what made the HIMMY moment so important, because it wasn't just about honoring a player. It was about shifting the internal hierarchy of the entire team. In the NFL, you don't pick your stars from marketing meetings. You pick them from the locker room, and that's exactly what happened. This wasn't about calling Shadure HIM for fun. It was about players saying, this is our guy. This is who we believe in. This is who we'll go to war for. No press conference from the head coach could have done more damage or had more impact than that 45-second viral locker room clip. Because when the players speak without speaking, you'd better listen. It wasn't subtle either. They didn't toss him a pair of team socks and say, good job. They made a full-blown custom trophy, designed a t-shirt, turned it into a moment, and then made sure the world saw it. Not for clout, for clarity. And the message couldn't have been louder if they'd carved it into the walls of the locker room. This is no longer a debate. We've already chosen our quarterback. What are you waiting for? Now here's where things get interesting off the field. That kind of public backing, genuine, not manufactured, is rare. And when it comes from inside the locker room, it doesn't just boost morale, it reshapes power. It makes the quarterback bigger than a depth chart, bigger than a press release. It turns him into a rallying point, the center of the locker room gravity. And that forces management to act, even if they're not ready. Because support inside the room changes everything. It changes the structure of trust. It changes how plays are called. It changes who the team listens to, not just on Sundays, but every day. That's what a lot of organizations miss. Momentum inside the locker room doesn't wait for strategy meetings. Once your players rally around someone, they take control of the culture whether leadership likes it or not. And by presenting Shadure with that award, Cleveland's locker room didn't just support him, they anointed him. They made it known that no matter who holds the title of offensive coordinator, and no matter how many headlines the head coach tries to manage, they have decided who leads them on the field. And from that point forward, trying to reverse that momentum would be suicidal. Because now, if coaches hesitate to name Shadure the true starter, or worse, replace him for optics or favoritism, they won't just lose a player. They risk losing the room. And once players start feeling like leadership isn't aligned with what they see as truth, that's where things unglue. That's when veterans pull back. That's when conflict starts to quietly fracture everything inside the building, long before it spills into the media. But here's where it gets risky for management. They might have had other plans. Maybe they saw Shadure as a backup project, a developmental arm with potential down the road. Maybe the front office still wants to protect an older guy they're financially tied to. Or maybe, just maybe, they like the idea of controlling the narrative around his growth until it spiraled out of their hands. Too late. Because when your own players create an award for your rookie quarterback, the narrative no longer belongs to you. It belongs to them. So now, the pressure flips. The spotlight shifts away from the field and toward the decision makers. Especially in a franchise like Cleveland's, a team with a history of inconsistency at the quarterback position, locker room fractures, controversies, staff turnover. The last thing they can afford is to smother momentum like this. Because in the NFL, you don't always get a second chance at unity. What happened with the HIMMY Award wasn't a feel-good story on social media. It was the players drawing a line in the sand. It was them saying, "You might have brought Shadure here, but now he's ours." And for a team that's been stuck in cycles of instability for years, that kind of player-led clarity isn't just rare, it's priceless. So what happens now? That's the question fans, analysts, and executives are all asking. Because if the coaches and front office decide to override what the locker room has declared, it won't just be unpopular. It could unravel everything. The team chose their quarterback. The question is whether leadership has the courage to follow. By now, one thing is crystal clear. That HIMMY Award wasn't just about Shadure Sanders. It was about Cleveland. Because when a moment like that goes viral, raw, unfiltered, unscripted, it doesn't just reveal locker room loyalty, it forces a franchise to look in the mirror. What started as a breakout moment for a rookie suddenly turned into a referendum on the team's future. The real question wasn't if the Browns had found their next quarterback, it was whether they'd actually be smart enough to realize what just happened. And for a franchise like Cleveland, that's a terrifying place to be, because this city has seen this story before. Talented players rise, the locker room connects, the energy builds, and then something internal, some combination of mismanagement, ego, or outdated thinking kills the momentum. But this time feels different. Because this time, the message didn't come from the front office. It came from the players. They didn't wait for a slow, corporate rollout. They made their feelings known in the clearest way possible, with their actions, not their words. They crowned Shadure in front of the world. And in doing so, they gave leadership in Cleveland a rare opportunity, a clear path forward. But opportunities like this have a shelf life. Right now, the Browns are standing on one of the sharpest edges a team can face. They can either lean into what their locker room has already embraced, or they can cling to structure, charts, protocol, and destroy the very chemistry that made this team believe again. Because here's the hard truth no one in the media is saying yet. If Cleveland fumbles this moment, they might lose more than a quarterback. They might lose the locker room. They might lose core veterans. And they might destroy any chance at building a real identity, something this franchise has been chasing for decades. Because a moment like this, it redefines who your team is. It resets expectations from the ground up. If the players see a genuine leader and the management doesn't recognize it, how do you think that plays out? You don't need sources to guess. That's when guys stop going the extra mile. That's when quiet tension builds between players and coaches. That's when trades start to look appealing to stars who once felt hopeful. Loyalty is scarce in this league, but belief is even rarer. And right now, these Browns players believe in something real for the first time in a long time. The game plan? Simple, don't get in the way of what's already working. Because by endorsing Shadure, the players did more than just back a rookie, they chose an identity. His discipline, his quiet leadership, his preparation when no one was watching. That's what they want this team to represent. Not flash, not hype, but substance. Grit, steady, unshakable confidence. If the Browns front office is smart, they don't just support that, they build around it. Systematically, soulfully, with intention, because now expectations are rising. Fast. The fans have seen the shift too. The days of waiting for Cleveland to find their guy might finally be over. And that changes everything, from how rosters are built to how the coaching staff operates. If this truly is the start of a new era, it means some hard decisions are coming, and denying the team's momentum would be one of the worst mistakes in Browns history. Because make no mistake, Shadure doesn't need the Browns' approval to do what he's doing. But the Browns might need Shadure more than they've ever needed a quarterback. Look at the ripple effect already happening. The offense moves with more urgency. The sideline energy is different. The defense feeds off of his poise when the offense takes the field. This isn't about numbers, it's about tone. Vibe, culture, and culture, that's everything in a league where talent gaps are small. What separates a playoff team from a 6-11 disappointment usually isn't who throws the deepest pass. It's who believes in their identity and plays like it every single snap. The Browns gave that power to the locker room, intentionally or not, and the locker room made its choice. They're rolling with Shadure. Now management faces their own test. Will they support the quarterback that's earned it the hard way, or will they default back to safe options, playbook politics, or whoever fits a narrative crafted months ago? Because doing that now wouldn't just lose games, it would lose trust. And that trust is everything. Once the players see that leadership isn't aligned with reality, the damage is irreversible. even if no one says it out loud. That silent disconnect is how great teams rot from the inside out. But here's the upside, the part that should give Cleveland hope. This moment, this movement, this shift is salvageable. It's right there, waiting to be embraced. All the team has to do is stop pretending and start listening. Because what the players built didn't come from hype, it came from truth. They saw the hours Shadure was putting in. They felt the calm when he stepped into huddles. They knew he wasn't just pretending to be the leader, he already was one. So the Browns don't need to invent a direction anymore. They already have one, wearing a HIMMY shirt, holding a trophy his teammates made with pride. All Cleveland has to do is follow the momentum their locker room already set in motion. Because for once, they're not chasing a leader. They've got one. And now it's on the franchise to ask itself a simple question. Are we really ready for a new era? Or are we about to repeat the same mistakes we've made for 25 years?